So my original talk title was much longer, but I trimmed it down so it could fit nicely on the slide. This is joint work with some of my colleagues at LinkedIn. And in this talk, I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the kinds of problems we face when we try to build our systems, our recommender systems, and evaluate them. And I don't know how many of you here know much about LinkedIn, so I just want to give a little bit of context for the company I work for and the kinds of things we're working on. We've got over 200 million registered members around the world, and it's, as you can see, we're only maybe, we're less than half in the United States, so we have actually a very international website, and it's a professional social network, and our mission is to connect the world's professionals and to make them more productive and successful. And so when you think about that, many of you know of LinkedIn, and you know of it as the profile where you can put your, hey, here is my a professional profile of record about who you are, your career, your skills, and things like that. But it's much more than that. We've got a lot of tools for contact management, finding jobs, companies, finding information about companies, or staying informed about them. There's group discussions, and we also have original content polls. And then all these things are sort of meant to tie into our mission of connecting the world's professionals and making them more productive, successful. And in that space, I work on the recommendations engine team, and we build recommender systems where we're trying to work toward that mission. For example, here are a couple products that the team works on. So recommending jobs that you might like, that you might be interested in, and we look at your profile, your network, features like that to recommend jobs where you may be a good fit. Or similarly, because it's not just about finding jobs, it's also about staying informed, staying connected. We also recommend groups that you might like to join. So these are professional or thematic groups where you can communicate with colleagues, ask questions, and so on. But what I work on most specifically is LinkedIn Today. And so some of the examples I'll be using will be from this product. And LinkedIn Today is a news product within LinkedIn. It's not just news, it's blog posts or original content that may be written on LinkedIn. And we're trying to recommend that content to our members in such a way that we can help them stay informed and keep them educated and so on. So there are a couple contexts where we have a product itself that you can navigate into, but we also show news articles right there on the homepage. And it's my responsibility to make sure that we do a good job of recommending that content to you. And in that context, one of the big problems we face is how we evaluate whether we're doing a good job of recommending content to you. And so that's going to be the first part of my talk. I'm going to talk about the different ways we evaluate and why. Ultimately, what LinkedIn cares about is some sort of business impact of these recommender systems. And this kind of measurement is something that is maybe like, we want to have more people using LinkedIn on a daily basis. So that daily active unique visitor is sort of what we want to optimize for, but it's really hard to do that. And in fact, it's hard to measure your system's changes if you're trying out a new algorithm and know whether this small algorithmic twiddle is something that actually is contributing to daily active unique visitors or not. So what we actually wind up doing in practice is we measure proxies that we think are important. And when we're doing these measurements, we're actually trying to get at a few different aspects of the problem. For example, are we good at selecting items that our members will interact with and putting them near the top of our result lists or our recommendations? But we also care about prediction accuracy. Can we accurately model the responses of our members? Can we give good estimates of the likelihood that a member will click on a specific news article or advertisement or job recommendation? And then the third aspect that is one that we in the academic community tend to spend a lot of time focusing on is, are the results relevant? And in that context of the different kinds of things we evaluate, there's also detail about how we do this and where we do this. And we need both online and offline evaluations. So for example, in the case of online evaluations, we're doing direct measures of engagement. For example, Mark mentioned that that's something that's common to do in search, and these are measures like click-through rates, or if there's other kinds of heavyweight actions like following something, or we measure those directly, and they're very easy to measure online, and they also give us a good sense for whether people are engaging with our system. The online kind of measure is important also for testing new variants, we use these as some of our main decision makers, the results of these online tests. And it can be pretty straightforward if you have good tracking, but it's important that you be able to track all of these interactions that you need in order to compute the metrics. But there's a big caveat there. It can be expensive to make one of your new algorithmic ideas something that you can easily run in an online setting. So you may want to do some exploration and prototyping of ideas, but you don't necessarily want to invest the money into making it fast enough or able to scale to all of your members. So that's where the other part of evaluation comes in, and that's offline. And in these cases, it's really helpful for prototyping, or measuring. When we do this, we'll measure quality with respect to our gold standard data sets. So these gold standard data sets may be things built like using the Cranfield methodology, where you pull search engine results and you have human assessors, but they may also just be constructed from log data, where you've tracked the user interactions and you'd like to use that in some way to estimate how your members will perform, will interact with your new test, how your new algorithm will perform before you put it online. And because we're often caring about the online metrics that we measure, which are things like these interaction rates, it's a little different than measuring precision at a certain number or classifier accuracy. And so it can be difficult to get good offline evaluations that correlate well with your online measures. And so I'll talk more about that later, about one thing that we're using at LinkedIn. So there were a few aspects of evaluation, a few kinds of things that we want to evaluate. And so the first one that I mentioned was selection and ordering. Are we doing a good job of identifying the items and ranking them highly? And so in the online setting, these are directly measurable. But the offline setting, it can be difficult to capture any of these biases that may factor in so that you can actually infer good test collections. And so I think in the community, in the academic community, we're very familiar with some of these biases, like the position bias, like results that are near the top of a search result list or a recommendation are more likely to be clicked on than other results. And that's just one example of a bias that may make it difficult. I'm going to talk about more later. The second thing, I think that we often focus on only are we doing a good job of ordering the results, and that's actually not enough. Consider a advertising scenario where we have two items and we have different costs per click for the item. For example, $1 for item A and $2 for item B. And if we have our true click-through rate of 0.03 and 0.02, then the true revenue we'd expect to make out of that would be the optimal strategy would be to choose item B. Now, we may do a good job of ordering the items with respect to interaction rates. For example, in this case, our estimated CTRs are off, but the ordering of the items is the same. But we make the wrong decision because our estimated click-through rate is off. So therefore, we'd wind up choosing item A instead of item B. So it's important in advertising to make sure that we are good at estimating these interaction rates. But it comes up in other contexts too. For example, if you have multiple objectives that you want to trade off, if you want to trade off revenue versus member engagement, you need to have good estimates of both. If you have different kinds of interactions that a member can make on your items, such as sharing a result or saving it or clicking on it or liking it, and you have different relative values of these actions, then it can be helpful to have good prediction accuracy so that you can, when you do your final ranking and final aggregation, that you can actually accurately estimate these predictions. And so then in the online scenario, what we measure are the things that actually depend on this accurate prediction, for example, ad revenue. In the offline scenario, you can do comparisons of the predicted rates to the actual rates. And so it's not just about precision and recall, it's also about doing a good job of having the accurate estimate, so you can measure those differences as well. So the biases that make offline evaluation of the ranking and selection and ordering problem that I mentioned on the previous slide can also factor into your prediction accuracy. So while in the selection and ordering case it makes it hard to do the evaluation, in the prediction case it's more straightforward to do the measurement, but you may need to model these biases as features in your system in order to have good prediction accuracy. The third kind of measurement that that can be important is sort of the relevance and quality measures that we typically have. They often ignore many issues of context. That helps us have repeatable, reusable test collections. And they can be useful for measuring things like just quality, or is in the context of recommender systems, we often use static test collections to say, hey, are these news articles appropriate for the LinkedIn brand? And in those cases, more traditional measures are helpful. That's not the focus of this talk, but I want to call that out as an important aspect of the set of things we use when we evaluate. And to reiterate, it's a multi-dimensional problem. We need both online and offline measures, and there are other kinds of assessments that can be important when you're building systems that you have for your members, for your users. And so, as other examples, like user studies can help you understand the problem better, can help you understand how you measure and how you should be measuring. Or user feedback from your members can help you identify systematic problems. So the next set of slides I'm going to go through talk about some of the biases that I've seen at LinkedIn in content recommendation that can either be important as features for good prediction accuracy, or they can be important as they can be things that make it difficult to do offline evaluations when you're measuring the quality of your rankings. The first thing, this should come as no surprise, but people do get tired of seeing the same results, same recommendations over and over. And in this graph, we've measured relative click-through rate. So we've taken a bunch of news articles that we recommended on the homepage of LinkedIn to our members, and we looked at the click-through rate of that item as the divisor. So at 0 previous impressions of an item, this is sort of our reference point. It's going to be a click-through rate of 1 because it's the click-through rate at 0 impressions divided by the click-through rate at 0 impressions. And then each of these, as we move towards the right along the x-axis, we add in additional impressions. So for this data point, it's if the member had seen the news article once before, what was the likelihood they would click on it, divided by if they hadn't seen it before at all. And similarly, 10 times if they'd seen that news article 10 times before versus that. So as you can see, there's a strong downward decaying trend. So you don't want to show those items to a member too many times. Now there's one interesting little blip here. It looks like it's good to show our members, an article more than once. What we actually have here is that we're getting, because as we move along the x-axis, we're getting a different set of members in going into each data point. So here we're seeing more active users, whereas somebody who just visits the website once and doesn't really spend any time there. So that's a little bit of the bias in this example of bias. If you condition this on more active members, then it actually looks much more like a downward smooth decay. Another example of some of the biases that we see in how people use LinkedIn today are that how you get to LinkedIn today shapes what you do next. It sort of informs maybe the mindset of our members. And so what I've done here is I've broken down the different actions that you can do on the LinkedIn Today pages, to doing more stuff within Today, doing nothing, clicking on an article or interacting with an article, going back to the LinkedIn homepage, or going to like a personal part of the site, such as communications or profiles. And I've broken down the actions by how you came to LinkedIn Today. These are some of the large ways you can large ways that people get to the Today product. They're either already within LinkedIn Today, and so they're navigating around that part of the website. They come directly from the homepage, or they come from these sort of profile or personal communication parts of the website. And so, for example, if you're within LinkedIn Today and you're navigating there, you're more likely to continue navigating and exploring that part of the website. So these are, again, relative rates. So this is relative to if you don't condition on refer. And you're less likely to abandon, and you're less likely to go to other parts of the website. However, if you come to LinkedIn Today from these profile or communication parts of the website, you're far more likely to go right back to them. And so this tells us a little bit about the member's mindset when they arrive into that website, into the Today part, the part of the website. So it's important for us to think about that, understand that. We haven't done much of that. We just have this this chart just recreated this analysis just recently. But this is helpful in terms of understanding how our members use the product, but it also becomes a bias that makes prediction difficult, and it becomes a bias that makes offline evaluation using log data also quite difficult. And another example is that the behavior of our members changes dramatically throughout the day within the LinkedIn Today product. So this has been corrected to the members' local time. This is, again, relative rates because I can't share absolute rates. And so I think it's not surprising, but the click-through rates on articles, that varies throughout the day. So in the morning and maybe in the afternoon, you're more likely to be in a content consumption mode than you are in the evening. But what is really interesting and fascinating with this chart is that some of where this is, what's changing is not necessarily the abandonment rate. That's fairly flat throughout the day, as is the rate of interacting within LinkedIn Today. That doesn't seem to change too much based on time of day. So what's happening? Why are people what's getting sacrificed? It's the other actions. So you're far less likely to go into the personal parts of the LinkedIn website, the profiles and communications, than you are to interact with an article. So it's interesting that we're not really, it's affecting the interaction rates overall as a website, but we are, people are interacting with LinkedIn Today with different mindsets. And so, to reiterate, the traditional test collections rarely capture these biases because they are created in laboratory environments where we don't actually have much of those kinds of interactions or in a larger, in the context of a larger website. And so we have to find ways to work with that and measure that and capture that. And so the next part of my talk is, I'm actually not talking about work that we did at LinkedIn, although we have people who are at LinkedIn who have worked with this method, and we're starting to work with it ourselves. So I'm basically stealing somebody else's work and presenting it to you. This method is a offline replay, so that we can have less biased estimates of the ranking quality. And this is work done at Yahoo by John Langford and some of his colleagues, and it's in the context of a contextual bandit-based algorithms. And I want to make sure I spend a little time to talk to you about what that phrase, the contextual bandit, is. So the naming of this contextual bandit problem goes back to the multi-armed bandit problem, which actually is a reference to the one-armed bandit. So if you go into a casino, they have these slot machines, and you pull the bandit, and so that's you pulled its arm, so that's the arm of the bandit, and it's called a bandit because it steals your money. And the multi-armed bandit problem is one where you have a choice of many different slot machines, and there's the rewards that you can get from the different slot machines may vary by machine. And so the problem then becomes, can we efficiently learn by playing the slot machines which machines are more likely to give you more reward and pay out more? The contextual bandit problem is a variant of the multi-armed bandit problem where you may be provided more information. For example, suppose that you have a hypothesis that the machines front of the casino near the door are more likely to pay out in the morning, so they get you in, and then but they change the payout rates throughout the day. So it can be important to have that information about what time it is and use that in your model as you're modeling the rewards. And that has a very natural sort of parallel to many of the problems that we work on, like recommender systems or advertising. So within LinkedIn today on our homepage, we may have a small set of news articles that we think are good enough to show in this box here. And the problem is then to choose among these K candidates the best news article. And the context may be things like member information, what we think their interests are, time of day, anything else that may be useful in the ranking. And so the goal here is to, again, maximize reward, making use of our previous observations. So it's much like a reinforcement learning or an active learning kind of setting, where we have repeated trials that we can do. We may show an item many times to our members, and so there we want to devise an efficient strategy for doing this. I'm not going to talk about algorithms much for this, but it's helpful to give a very simple example. It's not an optimal example, but a very simple example, ignoring context, would be epsilon greedy, in which case you reserve epsilon% of the traffic to do exploration of the items. So if you're in the casino, you may just 5% of the time go around and play a random machine. Then for the remainder of the traffic, say 95% of the time, you play the machines that you think actually have the highest reward. We can do a lot better than that. And in recommender systems, where you have context, that can also be a big help. But it can be really difficult to actually evaluate these things without putting them on the live website, setting aside some percentage of traffic for your new approach. But there's been some recent work on trying to better make use of log data. So I'm going to talk about one solution for that. This is the work that I'm from Yahoo. And in this case, I'm going to start with where we only have one item to place. And for notation, we have all the features we need to rank all items. So that's our X vector. We have the reward for selecting any particular item. And this H function is our ranker. And so our expected reward at any given trial is the probability that your ranker selects item I, given the features, times the reward, and so we sum over that. So that's our expected reward. For example, if you're doing click-through rate, your reward would be 1 if there's a click. And so we'd like to estimate this, and we'd like to be able to estimate this in an offline setting. To do this, we need to capture some live data from the live system. What we collect then is, so here I've added subscripts for the different trials because we have a bunch of trials or a bunch of views of the homepage. And so XXT is the item that the online system actually selected at a particular time. This is the observed reward. So it would be 1 if the member clicked on it, and 0 if the member did not click on that item. And it's important to note we only observe the reward for items selected at any given time. So here this is your X data, you know, all the news articles, maybe the time of day, the member's geolocation, information about the member itself. This is the item that was selected, and then whether there was a reward or not. And so we collect this context information because we think it may be helpful in building our anchor, but this gathering the data in this way, where we have the actual presentations and the observed rewards, that has the biases built into our measure. But because we want good prediction accuracy, in addition to good ranking, we want these as our features as well. And so our replay estimator, it sums over all of the log data that we collected. This is the indicator function, which is 1 if this is true and 0 if not. So it only considers items where our new algorithm that we're testing offline selects the same item as the item that is selected in the online system. We have our observed reward, and then we have a weight on this particular item in our data set. And that weight is important. And it can be quite simple. So it is the 1 over the probability that the item was selected in the actual online system, conditioned on the fact that the item was selected in our offline system. Now, if these are independent, then it's just 1 over the probability that our item was selected in the online system. And so here I'm making something, there's something important here. It's the probability that the item was selected. And that's the critical piece, is that the online selection needs to have some randomness to it. So the log data you're collecting needs to have, not be a deterministic algorithm. But if you do this, you get an unbiased estimator. And the probability for selecting an item in the online system must be greater than 0. It must be random, but it need not be uniformly distributed among the items. But it's easiest to do uniform. For example, if you've only got 40 items, then your online ranker in the data that you're collecting, you might just randomly choose, uniformly choose one of those items. And so then that's what this probability here is. It's 1 over 40. If the number of items, the number of ranked items is large, this estimator has problems because the selected items of the randomized data and of the new ranker, it may not match often. So in that case, you either need more data, or you need to work with fewer items. But this works in practice even if the item set changes over time, so you can still use this approach. It's easy to generalize it for multiple positions, but there's a lot of caveats that start coming into play now. So you could just sum over the positions here, and it's the same equation. Again, this makes an assumption that the reward among the different positions is independent, which may not be true in practice, but it may also not have that much impact on the quality of your estimate. And so this estimator that they worked on for the contextual bandit problem is actually really highly correlated with actual observed data. So they've found it to be really helpful at Yahoo, and we're working with it some at LinkedIn as well. And I want to stress that that it's very important that we have good predictors online and offline of our online performance. And a lot of other measures that we've worked with in the past have had very low correlation. So we don't have much trust in our offline data sets. So we often have to just make sure that we push everything to production. We're trying to get away from that because it takes time to do that. So there's one way you can deal with large item sets, and that's to treat this as a re-ranking problem. So you fix the randomization to the top K results from your base ranker and your online system. You still do randomization of those, but this does introduce some bias. And there are two things you can do online then is you can either apply your learned ranker as a re-ranking of those top K items, so you have a two-pass ranking system, or you can apply it on all items and hope that the bias in your estimate does not harm. Of course, you'll want to measure that online. And so I'm going to do a little blast through a few slides on how we measure our performance online, some of the caveats that we had is that your replay estimator may actually have high variance, or you introduced some bias and you want to confirm that. Or there are things that are sometimes not well captured within an offline replay system that actually make a difference on the website. For example, if your new ranker is way too slow, it may impact their interaction rates. And so we do this by doing bucket testing, and we reserve a portion of traffic for the test bucket and compare the performance of the new algorithm that's run on the test bucket to the control bucket. And there's a few things that are important here. You may be running many tests in parallel to different parts of your website, and so you want your tests to be orthogonal. And one way to do that is to use a hash algorithm that is seeded differently per test, so that when you set aside 95% of your population, you're setting aside for a control, and 5% for a test, you're setting aside different percentages of your population each time. There's also a novelty effect that you need to be aware of. So when it's very common when you try something new out that people notice, hey, this is different, and start interacting with it more. So there can be a burn-in period that you want to allow the novelty effect to wear off before you actually make your decisions about whether an approach is better or not. And you also have to be careful for different kinds of variance or bias in your tests. For example, you may have a low traffic part of your website where you're doing the test, and 5% might actually be a very noisy estimate. So you may need to target more or run the test longer. Or if you have a small bucket, you may wind up with just a non-representative sample. There are techniques like the bootstrap to estimate variance that you should use. And one common method is to help with this is to actually launch an AA test, where A is the same as your baseline, but you target a 5% test of that, and that just gives you a quick guide to see. Ooh, it crashed. Let's see. Okay, so in some cases, setting up a test may be difficult. So it's common practice to set up bucket tests where you reserve buckets of members. But if you want to test a network effect, like on a social search, and how they then reshare information and so on, you may wind up with a very disconnected network when you do this. And so there's been a little bit of work that's just happened around there about how to do bucket testing in live traffic when you need to worry about network effects, and I think that's still there's a lot of work in progress there. So to wrap up, it's important to evaluate on these different dimensions, and it's not just about relevance, it's also prediction accuracy, and whether how the online metrics that we actually care about, well, we care about them all, but the online metrics that are very easily measurable, how they're going to behave, and we want to have good offline evaluation techniques that are representative of the online performance. And so I talked a little bit about some of the methods that are out there, but I think there's a lot of work to go in that area.
Thank you very much, Paul.